Guys, in the knife community, there have always been two camps of people. There have always been the no knife is too big. As a matter of fact, this knife isn't big enough crowd. And there's also always been the guys that are like the
size doesn't matter, it's how you use the knife
crowd. And then there's guys like me that are just somewhere in the middle. We're going to take a look at big knives versus small knives. There are a lot of reasons to carry a big knife over a small knife, or a small knife over a big knife. But the biggest one is just personal preference. Some people just like smaller knives. This Big Letter XL is a rather large knife. You're looking at 9 inches overall. So is this Mastiff by Artisan Cutlery. But these two knives are very, very capable small EDC knives. So what would be the reasons that you would want a smaller knife or a larger knife? Let's kind of get into them, because your first one is going to be what you're going to do with it. So like I said, what are you doing with the knife is definitely going to have a lot to do with the knife you choose. Like I said, this Big Letter XL is a rather large knife. It's a very comfortable knife. It's easy to use, it's easy to carry, and it's easy to wield. But for some of the smaller tasks done up to close to your hand, this could feel a little clumsy and awkward. You've got, smaller things you're going to do. You're not going to use an axe to sharpen a pencil. Same kind of thing applies here. A smaller task that you're going to do close up to your hand, or a small duty task, you're probably going to have better control of this and easier to handle. Now, the opposite comes into play when you talk about like outdoor tasks or camp tasks. They're better done with a larger knife. You're going to have an easier time with something like this if you're trying to make like tent stakes. If you've got a fixed blade like this or larger, you can probably do some batoning of wood. So the bigger knife is going to deal with those bigger tasks, always going to be easier. And a lot of these larger knives, you can do some of the medium-sized tasks. The nice thing about a big knife is you can adjust your grip and get up and do some of the smaller tasks. If it's a comfortable knife in hand and it's balanced pretty well, you can absolutely get up and do the smaller tasks on these knives. You can always use less of this knife, but you can't, if this is the knife you have in your pocket, you can't make this knife any bigger to do bigger tasks. So just knowing what you're going to do with the knife is going to allow you to, have an easier time of what you're going to, picking a knife. Now, the next thing you have to ask yourself is how you want this knife to perform as far as cutting. This is a Ferrum Forge Pretium. It is a rather large knife. And this is a Ferrum Forge Stinger, which is a much smaller knife. Typically, larger knives are thicker behind the edge because they use a lot thicker blade stock. Now, I say typically because you can have some exceptions where you have larger knives that have a very thin behind the edge and smaller knives that are ground very thick behind the edge. But typically, a smaller knife like this utilizes a much thinner blade stock, and it's going to slice better. So you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're trying to do slicey tasks with this big bulky knife that is just going to bind up. Now, this knife does cut very well and it's very, very sharp, but it's never going to slice through material as well or as cleanly as this. If you're doing small camp tasks like food tasks, this is something you want to think about. This is going to do food tasks much better. You're going to run much less risk of having to force through food and material and cut yourself. Same with like cardboard and things like this. It's going to be a lot easier for you to do this. If you're doing something where there's any lateral force of prying, you may want a larger knife because it by default should have a thicker blade stock. So just another one of those quick little things that you want to look at. There are always exceptions to this. So when you pick a knife, try to look at the blade stock. Those specs should be available. You can see dramatic difference between these two knives. There's not a huge dramatic difference in them in size. I mean, this is definitely smaller, but this is absolutely a much, much larger blade stock. So that's just one of the other things you want to think about. Next thing you want to look at is like, how are you going to be carrying this knife? Is it going to be comfortable? Because sometimes big knives can put themselves in a position where they are uncomfortable depending on the situation. So you want to think to yourself, like in a larger knife, like this is one I brought out this is that Hoback. Just as an example, if you see that pocket clip terminates there, if you've got this in your pocket, and this is a big knife, if you've got this in your pocket, you've got that much of the knife sticking out. If you're going to spend most of your day seated, this is going to be uncomfortable. And the other thing you've got to think about, does the pocket clip placement at all, could it cause problems with you moving about throughout the day? If the pocket clip is something that could be a catch hazard, maybe you work in an area where it's kind of a constricted area, like you're in a tight area, is it going to put that knife in a position where you might get caught up and you can get hurt in machinery? And if you're carrying a fixed blade knife, the sheath, how is the sheath placement going to be? Is this going to put this in a position where this is going to, every time you walk through a door, if you're carrying this Scout carry on your left-hand side, is this going to catch on the door frame and then yank and be uncomfortable? So you have to look at all these things on how you're going to carry. A lot of times you can bridge that gap on a knife that is kind of mid-sized. This is not a small knife. This is the Concept Entity. And the pocket clip on this one puts it in a good position where you have a big knife that comfortably carries, and it's not going to be catching on things. And that angle that they've got it at, that's when it sits in your pocket, you can see like that. It's going to sit a little bit more at an angle, and it's not going to put direct pressure on your side. So if it's something you're going to be carrying all day in the place you're going to be carrying it, you may want to think about that. Now, typically smaller knives are a much smaller package, and you don't have to worry about that as badly. And the other thing too is this knife going to sit down in your pocket and not be in the way? So a smaller knife takes up a lot less pocket real estate than some of these larger knives. So that's just another one of those considerations. The next is a weight consideration, and you obviously are going to find that a smaller knife is lighter. If you are someone that absolutely has to have a lightweight package, say you're a hiker or something like that, this might be something that you're wanting to look at, getting into a smaller, lighter knife. The CGRB Rhea or the QSP Penguin. These larger knives, like this Artisan Mastiff, is very heavy. It's very heavy, and it could get uncomfortable to carry. My Ferrum Forge Fortis, I love this knife, but there is zero weight reduction in this. It is a heavy, big, beefy knife. So, you know, a smaller EDC done in a lighter form factor might be something that is up your alley. And just like when we talked about comfort and carry, that lighter knife is probably going to be more comfortable in your pocket. Every ounce counts. I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't seem like it, but a big heavy knife in your pocket, if you carry it around a lot, you're going to notice it, and it just adds to off-centering your weight, and you can cause yourself some pain and discomfort, like back pain and things, from having unequal weight distribution on your body when you're carrying gear. So there you go. Weight, big consideration when you're thinking about the size of a knife. Comfort in use is always going to be a big thing. This is one of my biggest selling points on knives is ergos. Typically, guys with larger hands like me, a larger knife will probably feel a little bit more comfortable in hand. And the adverse is true. If you are a smaller guy, this large knife might not be comfortable. Now, there's always exceptions. All of the knives on the table here are incredibly comfortable in hand. So there are exceptions to that. A smaller knife can be every bit as comfortable in hand for someone with larger hands. And some of these larger knives can be comfortable for someone with smaller hands. It's all going to be determined on what your personal preferences and what you like and feel in hand. Some of these knives, like this one, incredibly comfortable little knife. The same with this Echo from CGRB. They are all great in their own right, but you will find, based on your personal preference, hand size, and things like that, that some knives just do not feel as comfortable. I have this one out because while this is a rather large knife, and I do like this knife, it's not as comfortable in hand for me as the other large knives because it does not fit my hand the way I want. I wish it was a little wider. Now, I do know that that's not the design of this knife, but had it had a little bit of changes, it would be a lot more comfortable. It's still really comfortable, but it's not optimal. These other knives fit my hand so much better. I have had small knives that felt great and large knives that felt horrible and vice versa. So just one of those things, always, always, always try out a knife before you just buy one. If you get a chance to try one at a show or something, that's your best bet. And this last one is something that is a regional thing, and I think it's silly because a knife is a knife is a knife, and that's legalities. There are a lot of municipalities where this is fine and this is a felony. You know what I'm saying? There are places where This is okay for me to carry every day and have in my pocket. And this one, if I get stopped, the police are going to have a serious problem. So those restrictions on blade length can get you into some serious trouble. This is a very large knife, 9-inch overall on this Migron Valona. Also one of the best budget knives you're going to find out there. But those limits are in place in a lot of areas. And you can't just go by state guidelines, because the California rules here are basically everything's fine. San Diego, everything's fine. But if I go up the road a matter of like an hour, I am now breaking the law, because different municipalities inside those states have different rules. Same like New York State versus New York City carry rules. So you don't put that, don't put that 10-inch tack folder in your pocket and go to the fair and think that you're fine if you maybe have crossed like a county line or a city line. So guys, that's it on this one pretty much. Let's turn this around and do some final thoughts. This has been fun. It's one of those things that a lot like reasons, like what makes the perfect knife, what makes the best size. So let's turn around and do some final thoughts.
So with all that being said, guys, there is no actual real answer. This was just a lot of fun. Looking at different things that you do with knives are going to determine what size knife you need. I personally, the day-to-day things that I do now, gravitate to the knives that are in the smaller to medium size range, but I do absolutely still like my big folders. So it's just going to be a matter of preference. You can always use a little bit less of a big knife, but you can't make a little knife bigger, as I said. So guys, that's it on this one. I hope you liked the video. If you do like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down, but tell me what I could do different. I can't change the content if you don't tell me what you don't like. If you want to support the channel, as simple as like, share, subscribe, drop a comment, hit the bell icon. If you want to support the channel financially, I would absolutely appreciate it. There are sponsor links down below for Coffee Brand Coffee and Tempered Trail. They are my channel sponsors. You can save 5% at checkout with the coupon code Crazy Sharp, capital C, capital S, Crazy Sharp at either one of them. The Coffee Brand Coffee one has it built in. I also have an Amazon store that takes you directly to Amazon through my link. If you pin that to your browser and use that to do any shopping you're going to do on Amazon, I'd greatly appreciate it. It supports the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. And I do have a membership where all of the members get access to my Gilded server, which is a community that we've built around the world now. A lot of fun. We always hang out. There's always something going on there. The baseline and premium tier members are automatically entered into giveaways that I do on the Gilded server, and that's the only way you're going to find out if you won. So you got to be on the server. And the premium guys have access to a sharpening tutorial series here on YouTube behind that paywall. Guys, that's it on this one. I love you all. Keep it clean in the comment section. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. And I'll see you in the next video.
Thank you.